How to draw a golden retriever. The reference image is in the description below. You want to start out by outlining the eyes, making sure you're leaving room for the highlights. And with the brown color, you're going to implement that a little bit around the pupil. And then once you have those two done, then you can start to apply a little bit of a more detail in some of the highlights using a light blue. And then applying the first layer usually depends on the base layer of the color of the animal, but this one is a nice golden red color. So I'm going to use a little bit of that blonde color and then start to apply some burnt sienna colors with a little bit of some orange tones. Since this dog has definitely more red tones than anything else, it's going to be more of a saturated kind of portrait here. So I'm applying a lot more heavier pressure as well as darker colors. And you want to make sure that you're drawing in the same direction as the fur. And with that slice tool, you can start to etch away some of the highlights. All of those tools are based in my ebook with my materials list. You also can use a little bit of a green tone to apply some more natural tones based off of the environment that the dog is in. And then make sure you're still leaving room for some of the highlights. You could see that I've left room around the cheek and above in the forehead area. And in that top of the head, I left room for different colors. With color pencils, you cannot apply white over dark just like you can with paint. So you have to make sure you're leaving room. That way you can lighten those up with lighter colors later on. Now I also use a white pencil to do a little bit of burnishing, and burnishing is basically a method of applying a nice heavier waxy coating on top. It helps to blend a lot of those layers together. And then you want to make sure that the midtones and the highlights are kind of more left alone until closer to the end. The lowlights, you definitely want to get those good, like the shaded areas. And once you have kind of figured out all of those key features, then you can start to apply more detail overall once you have quite a few of those layers done. It's also really important to emphasize the eyebrows as well as the little highlights that are just above the eyes. That really incorporates the animal's personality and key features, especially if it's for a client and it's not your pet. You want to make sure that you are incorporating those very specific, unique features to this animal. I also just etched in some of the whiskers below the muzzle there with the slice tool. You can do that then or afterwards, but if they're really heavy whiskers, you can definitely apply that a little bit more of a heavier pressure with the sketch tool. And what it'll do, you'll see here in a little bit, is it'll just leave that white space there. So as we continue on, we're just really building up some layers. I'm making sure that everything is nice and smooth, especially for the smaller portrait. You want to make sure that everything is very smooth because you might still end up seeing the tooth of the paper. So just like with the left ear, the right ear, I'm going to apply the same methods, making sure I'm leaving room for the highlights and applying some of those red tones along with the orange tones. And then kind of going in with a little bit of pink because there is some nice warm pink tones in there too. And in some of the highlighted areas, I'm going to use the edge tool just a little bit just to get some of those nice highlights in there. And then you keep continuing on and make sure you're using a blend of colors. The more colors you use, the more realistic the portrait is actually going to look. If it's overwhelming or confusing for you, that's okay. This is all very fast paced, but I also offer real-time classes that are all online so you can play or pause at your leisure with a lot more detail. That will be in the link below. You can sign up for the membership or you can sign up for the 8-week Learn to Draw Your Own Pet program. So continuing on now. I used a little bit of blue to the highlights. You definitely want to make sure you have a nice contrast between the warm tones and the cool tones. That actually makes your portrait pop even more. That's a very important feature to remember. And then after using that slice tool just a little bit, let's move on to the nose here. Now I'm applying a brown for the base layer. Make sure that the nostrils are straight black. Most of the time they're just pretty much pure black. And make sure that you're leaving room for the highlight as well. So once you have everything pretty well blended, I know right now you can't see a whole lot of features, but you can use highlights to kind of incorporate some of those key features, especially where that nice shiny part on the top of the nose is. And then with the muzzle, it's about the same kind of method here. Still want to draw in the same direction as the fur, but you do want to make sure you're leaving room for the highlights and getting it nice and blended from the darker tones to the midtones to the highlights. A lot of what I do is freehand, but you can see that I still have an outline. You can also trace an outline and apply more details if you need to, such as where the highlights are and where the lowlights are. That may help you give some good guidelines overall. But for this one, since I've done quite a lot of freehand already, I only needed just to apply the certain key features. That way I knew where it was going to be placed in the paper itself. And now with the mouth, it's just more of a dark or black color pencil, and it kind of droops down a little bit to make sure that both sides of the mouth are even as much as possible. Sometimes the dog has an angle of the head, so one side will droop a little bit lower than the other. And then with the mouth, the lower jaw, you want to make sure there's a highlight too. So in this one, I just left it a little bit and then applied some blue tone to it. Blend it all in with some other colors. And now to move on to the neck and the rest of the body here. So this is going to be probably a little bit less detailed. Usually the head takes a little bit longer for me because it has a lot more details. And then the neck is just kind of more of just a big old tuft of fur that has different textures. So now you can really see that this with the slice tool, as I'm applying all these colors, you actually can see the whisker still because I had etched that in already. So now on this left hand side, I'm going chunk by chunk. So each little chunk of fur I am drawing in detail until I am pretty much complete, and then I'll move on to another chunk. I firmly believe in finishing one section at a time. That way I don't get overwhelmed and I kind of know proportionally where each part is actually located. So this kind of fur kind of does some weird angles. So I'm trying to replicate it as much as possible. And it took me a long time to figure out the coloring and the angles. So you can see that I will be spending a lot of time in this section. But as long as you're getting the right angle as well as where the highlights and the lowlights are located, it's okay if the coloring is just a tiny bit off. Just make sure that your client is okay with that if you're doing it as a commission. And then we'll be done here in just a little bit. I really do hope that this has been helpful already. Just keep following along here and you'll see that I'm literally leaving room for the highlights and working with a variety of those same colors that I applied in the head down to the neck here. And if you want to learn to draw your own pet, you can also sign up for that program. It's linked below. Or if you are simply just wanting to figure out like what kind of materials I'm using, I have 2 material ebooks. One is free, it's a budget-friendly material book, and the other one is a full-on budget or a full-on material book. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did find this video very helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you do have any questions or if you want to learn something new. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.